And on this particular night, it was very, very foggy. The weather was very, very bad. And so the captain decided to stay on the bridge that night to keep an eye on things. And he wasn't there very long when all of a sudden he got a signal from his signalman. Light bearing down on the starboard side. And so this alerted the captain that there was a collision going to happen. So he told his signalman to signal that ship to change course 20 degrees. Signalman did as he was told. Back came the signal. Suggest you change course 20 degrees. This kind of got the captain a little riled. He said, signal that ship. I'm a United States Captain, U.S. Navy. And the signalman did as he was told. Back came the message. I'm a seaman second class. I suggest you change course 20 degrees. Well, this infuriated the captain. He said, tell them I'm a United States Navy battleship. Change course 20 degrees. And the signalman did as he was told, and the signal came back. I'm a lighthouse. And the captain changed course 20 degrees. So why do I tell that story? Because we're in the midst of a major course adjustment, not only from a corporate standpoint with global integration, but also from the standpoint of the workforce that we're actually dealing with. And the presentation that I'm going to share with you today is based on some research that we did over the course of 2 years. About 4 years ago, we initiated that to try to understand what is happening relative to this new generation of workers and how it's going to affect the type of work that's being done and ultimately the workspaces that we're trying to design for that. I'm going to introduce you to a very strong force that has already entered the workplace. And those of us that are in the baby boomer generation know that for the past 30, 35 years, there's been a strong emphasis on, our needs, our behaviors, the kinds of things that we wanted, and that's all going to change very, very quickly if it hasn't already changed in your organizations. So who is this group of individuals? These are individuals that were born between the years of 1980 and 2000. They're 32 to 12 years old today. There's about 32 million of them in the workforce as we speak today, and as we'll talk later on, that number is increasing. When you look at the overall demographics, the baby boomers obviously are the largest segment in the workforce now, but again, it's estimated that 10,000 baby boomers per day for the next 20 years will be retiring. And again, we know that that number is going to slow a little bit based on the recent economy. People are hanging around a little bit longer, but nonetheless, that large population, and you can see in the middle there, the X generation is quite a bit smaller. And so you can see the impact of these 70 million plus individuals. And that's not even to consider a study that we just completed in India and China, where in India there's 450 million Gen Y people that are going to be entering the workforce there, and another 250 million in China. So it's a huge, huge force coming into the workplace. There was a technology conference at a major university, and one of the questions they asked both professors as well as students is, what do you think the office will look like in the next 20 years, or will there even be offices in the next 20 years? And the answer was unanimously, yeah, I think there's going to be offices in 20 years, but they're going to be so much different. They're going to look differently, they're going to act differently, they're going to function differently because of the onset of technology, because of the global integration of companies, and this distributed workforce that we're seeing now across the globe. Everything changes. Bottom line now is work can happen any place, anytime, anywhere, and I'm sure many of you are experiencing that today with your companies. So we thought this was an excellent opportunity to understand what is the impact of this going to have on environments, and what are the new behaviors, what are the emerging work styles and so forth that are going to happen, what are the expectations of this workforce, not only from their perspective but also from those of you that are employers as this huge force of people come into the workforce. So we use a human-centered design approach. This was actually brought to us by IDEO, who's a leading industrial design firm out of California. And we really implemented this over the past 10 years to really gather insights and knowledge and research so that we can develop applications, products that are human-centered, that really are meaningful to people that are using those products. And I'm going to use this kind of as a backdrop to kind of walk you through the research and some of the findings we had, and then ultimately some of the applications or things we see that might be happening today and going into the future. So it's basically involved, we need to understand what the current situation is and to develop more around that. And we do that through observation. We use a lot of cultural anthropology. We use a lot of ethnography, a lot of human-centered observation. We take all that data, we synthesize it. What are the patterns? What are the anomalies? What are the things that are happening so we can get an understanding of that? We put a cross-functional team together to try to take those insights and develop products, applications, points of view, if you will, around that and how that might affect you. Though some of you that are here from perhaps human resources, how does this information affect how you approach human resources? Some of you that are, globally integrated, how does this affect us as we start to integrate globally? So there's a lot of different ways in which to look at that. And then we prototype, do some fast prototyping to kind of understand what that might look like, and then we measure at the end of that. We're probably on a continuous basing, prototyping and measuring as we go to continue to apply applications. So the first step that we go through is to understand what the current work that's been done. So any of you know there's just a lot of stuff that's been written about Gen Y. And so we read all of the latest books, we talk to the latest subject matter experts, we try to understand what the nomenclature is, how people, the structure that they're using as our basis for entering it. And so we have a really good understanding of the work that's already been done and how that affects our research project and what we need to do to go forward. So then we conduct our own primary research. And we literally go out and conduct our own firsthand observations. We do contextual interviews, surveys, anything that we can to actually understand what is happening currently and what the expectations for the future might be. We do a lot of co-creation activities or workshops so that we can get not only the intellectual but the emotional part of the individual involved in helping us to understand what's going on and what should be happening. When we go into the synthesis process, we basically just throw this all up on a board and kind of see what it tells us or what it says to us and try to create buckets and patterns and trends that are happening. And our next step is to actually create design principles around that so that we have a really firm foundation on how we're going to go forward with a product, with an application, or something of that nature. And then we put this cross-functional team together to brainstorm, co-create solutions, share ideas. This cross-functional team is important because it's amazing how different points of view from different people from different angles can really provide tremendous insight into the problem that you're trying to solve. Then we prototype and measure to understand and test before we actually take anything to market. So I want to talk first about the understand phase and what we did here and some of the things that we found. And we really asked ourselves three questions. How is Gen Y different from other generations? What is the nature of their social contract? And what we wanted to know there is, what does Gen Y think their employer owes them? What are their expectations of their employer? And conversely, what does the employer expect of this generation of workers? So it's kind of that social contract of, I'm the employee, you're the employer, what do you expect of me and what do I expect of you? And then how will they influence work in the workplace? So how will these new behaviors, these new expectations, these new ways of doing things affect what the workplace looks like, how work will actually be conducted, and the behaviors of the worker that are involved in that? So when we look at this Gen Y individual, Again, as I mentioned, these are individuals born between the year of 1980 2000. There's already many of them in the workplace. These are the children of baby boomers and the early Gen Xers. So you can start to understand the influence in the context in which they grew up to kind of get a better sense of why they have certain views and why certain things are more important to them than others. So when we look at this and kind of lay this over, you can see that the Gen Y, and I might add that many of you might also hear them referred to as millennials, the I generation, the E generations. Some people refer to them as trophy kids. Anybody know why that moniker is placed upon them? Yeah, I happened to coach for many years in the rec league in my hometown, and it always amazed me that the mothers of these kids, win, lose, or draw, they had to get a trophy at the end of the year to show that they had accomplished something. And I had my own kids involved, and if you have that, you have 15 or 20 trophies, collecting dust, and nobody ever picks them up after the first day. They run out with a smile on their face that they got one. But it's all about this nurturing, this recognition, this giving them the kind of recognition that these baby boomer parents felt that they needed. But at any rate, this class of individuals is growing in the workplace about 14 to 21% over the past 4 years. So it is the fastest growing segment of the workforce. They're entering at staggering rates. And you can start to see when I overlay this kind of what the workforce looks like. It's kind of an interesting exercise to do with your own company is to go back and look at your overall employment and determine, how many are baby boomers, how many are Gen Y, how many are Gen X, to kind of get a sense for where that's going. As an example, Steelcase, over half of our employees are baby boomers. So again, as you look at it, you say, in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a significant shift, and they're probably going to be replaced by these Gen Y. So are we prepared, and are we ready to meet the needs and the expectations of that workforce in the kinds of programs, services, workplace, those kinds of things that are very important to this group. So that's kind of an interesting exercise, if you don't know, kind of get the demographics of what your company looks like. So as we said, there'll be a tremendous downsizing of that baby boomer segment over the next 10 to 20 years. And then again, as you can see by the chart, the Gen Ys will rapidly assume that, replacing those 75 million baby boomers that were in the workplace. So very significant change in the workforce. So the other thing we looked at, we talk about the age, year 1980 to 2000, and it's more than just age. And in fact, many people, some people you talk to, there's a 3 or 4 different year span in those targeted audience. It's more about how they define themselves through common events. 9/11, as an example, is a defining moment for many people. The first man walking on the moon for many of us is a defining moment of our generation. So we look at the politics, the social kinds of things, the pop culture, technologies. What are the things that people remember that shaped their lives, that had an impact on who we are? For some of us, the Beatles, believe it or not, were a significant event in our lives that kind of shaped